Rome, year 235 AD. Emperor Maximinus Thrax orders the minting of 40 million new coins in just 6 months. But there's a problem. The silver mines are empty. The solution? Mix copper with silver. Paint bronze gold. You think Rome fell because of barbarian invasions? No. Rome died suffocated by its own debt. And today the United States has $35 trillion in public debt. History doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes. Before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. I love knowing how far these stories reach. In the year 117 AD, Rome was the heart of the civilized world. 50 million people lived under the Golden Eagle. A quarter of known humanity used the same currency, the silver denarius. From Jerusalem to London, from Alexandria to the Rhine, a single Roman coin was enough to buy bread, wine, cloth, or tools. The denarius wasn't just money. It was trust materialized in silver. Each coin was 95% pure silver. Fixed weight, value guaranteed by the most powerful empire on earth. Merchants knew a Roman coin today would be worth the same tomorrow, and next year, and the next decade. This stability allowed Rome to build a global economy even before the word globalization existed. The empire built 400,000 kilometers of paved roads, more than the entire highway system of the United States today. Aqueducts transported millions of liters of clean water to cities with sewage systems, more advanced than many 19th century metropolises. Marble palaces reflected the Mediterranean sun, while markets bustled with spices from India, silk from China, amber from the Baltic. Rome didn't just govern by the sword. The empire's true weapon was trust in its financial system. A merchant in Londinium could do business with a trader in Antioch using the same currency, knowing the value would be honored. This network of trust sustained the greatest empire the world had ever seen. But behind the glory, something deadly was growing in silence, something invisible in the imperial statistics, something no army could defeat. The seed of destruction was already planted in the very heart of the Roman financial system. The problem began with a seemingly reasonable idea: expand without limits. In the 2nd century, Rome decided to grow faster than it could pay for. More soldiers on the frontiers, more provinces to conquer, more wars to finance, and wars cost gold. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the famous philosopher king, spent immense fortunes fighting Germanic tribes on the Danube frontiers. His son Commodus plunged the imperial treasury into gladiator spectacles, lavish feasts, and political games. When gold and silver began to run out, the emperors faced a difficult choice: cut spending or find a creative way to pay the bills. They chose creativity. So what if we mint copper and call it silver? It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. In the year 64 AD, under Nero, the denarius was 95% pure silver. By 100 AD, it dropped to 85%, still acceptable. By 200 AD, it plummeted to 50%. Half was common metal. By 270 AD, less than 5% silver. Just a thin silver layer over cheap copper. They literally painted bronze silver, stamped the emperor's face on it, and distributed it as if it were real wealth. But the market wasn't stupid. Veteran merchants began weighing each coin before accepting it. The smartest ones made small scratches on the edges to check the interior metal. Prices skyrocketed. A sack of wheat that cost 2 denarii went up to 8, then 20, then 50, then 100. Inflation devoured Rome from within like a silent cancer. A Roman soldier who earned 225 denarii per year discovered that his salary no longer bought even his own sandals. But what nobody knew was the worst part of all. The empire was trapped in a deadly snare. The more fake currency they minted, the more they needed to mint to pay the same debts. It was a vicious cycle with no escape. And the worst part? Nobody in power admitted that the problem was currency devaluation. The emperors blamed greedy merchants. They arrested bakers for raising the price of bread, executed money changers for refusing adulterated coins, persecuted merchants who weighed coins. That's where the empire began to die. And nobody noticed, because everyone was busy blaming the symptoms, ignoring the disease. The crisis didn't explode all at once. It came in waves, each more devastating than the last. First, inflation eroded the legions' salaries. The troops guarding the frontiers from the Rhine to the Euphrates received piles of coins that wouldn't buy food, weapons, or equipment. Hungry soldiers began plundering Roman villages to survive. The legions themselves became bandits. Then, taxes exploded. Rome needed to pay growing debts. The solution? Create new tributes on everything: taxes on trade, taxes on property, taxes on inheritance, taxes on birth and death. The empire created an army of tax collectors, the dreaded publicans, who traveled entire provinces confiscating goods. But the more the empire collected, the less people produced. Farmers abandoned lands cultivated for generations. Artisans closed workshops that had been operating for centuries. Entire families fled to the interior, away from cities and imperial collectors. The Roman economy entered demographic collapse. Cities emptied, fields turned into deserts. But this still wasn't the worst part. In the year 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian made the most catastrophic decision in Roman economic history. He published the Edict on Maximum Prices, an imperial decree that froze the prices of 2,300 different products and services. Bread, wine, meat, clothes, tools, wages for doctors, teachers, carpenters, soldiers, everything regulated by imperial law. The justification? Control the greed of merchants. The reality? Hide the collapse of the currency. The penalty for charging above the table? Death. You know what happened? Merchants simply stopped selling. Why risk your life selling wheat at a price that didn't even cover the cost of the seed? Why work when the regulated salary didn't buy food? Markets emptied overnight. Trade disappeared from cities. Products vanished from shelves. The black market emerged. Secret transactions, illegal barter. Rome's official economy died, and the final blow was still to come. Because when an economy dies, the empire that depends on it dies with it. In the year 410 AD, Alaric, king of the Visigoths, crossed the gates of Rome. For the first time in 800 years, a foreign army sacked the Eternal City. Romans watched in horror as barbarians invaded temples, burned libraries, stole treasures accumulated over centuries of conquests. But the brutal truth is that Rome was already dead inside, long before Alaric arrived. Coins literally turned to dust in people's hands. So light and fragile they disintegrated at the touch. Markets remained empty. Shops closed. Vendors disappeared. The soldiers who should have defended the frontiers hadn't received pay for months. They began accepting payment in land and products, not currency, because land still had value. Currency didn't. The magnificent Roman roads, which once allowed armies to march from Londinium to Jerusalem, rotted. Giant holes opened in the pavement. Bridges collapsed over rivers. Nobody had resources to repair them. Monumental aqueducts dried up. Clogged sewage systems overflowed into the streets. Rome's population plummeted from 1 million inhabitants to less than 50,000 in just 1 century. Miserable families camped inside the Colosseum. Goats grazed in the imperial forums. Marble palaces became ruins inhabited by beggars. The Roman Senate, which once governed 3 continents and decided the fate of millions, met in empty rooms debating laws that no one obeyed or respected anymore. And the currency? The denarius, that had once been the basis of world trade, ceased to exist. People returned to primitive barter. They traded chickens for bread, clothes for tools, work for food. 1,000 years of civilization, progress, culture, Roman law, engineering, philosophy, everything evaporated because money lost its meaning. Rome wasn't conquered by stronger armies. Rome was bankrupted by disastrous economic decisions. The barbarians merely kicked down a door that was already rotten. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Rome, at the height of the 3rd century crisis, had a debt equivalent to 200% of imperial GDP. The United States today carries a debt of $35 trillion. That represents 130% of American GDP, and growing. Rome devalued its currency by 95% over 200 years, transforming silver into painted copper. Since 1971, when Richard Nixon abandoned the gold standard and the dollar ceased to be convertible into precious metal, the American dollar has lost more than 98% of its real purchasing power. A 1971 dollar is worth less than 2 cents in purchasing power today. Rome financed endless wars on the frontiers until it completely emptied the imperial treasury. The United States has spent more than $8 trillion on wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan over the last 2 decades. Without decisive victories, without plunder, just growing debt. Rome increased taxes until it completely suffocated the economy's productive capacity. Today, the combined tax burden, federal, state, municipal, in developed countries is at the highest level in modern history. Rome printed fake currency thinking it could fool the market forever. Since 2008, global central banks have printed more than $25 trillion in quantitative easing, money created from nothing, without backing, without real production behind it. The parallels aren't coincidence. They're patterns. They thought they were too big to fall. That the denarius was eternal, because the empire was eternal. That Rome was invincible because it had always been invincible. But what the Romans didn't understand, and what few understand today, is that empires don't fall from the outside in. They rot from the inside out. The barbarian invasion is just the final chapter of a book that was already written decades earlier. And today we're repeating the same script page by page. Only the currency names have changed. The denarius became the dollar. The emperor became the Federal Reserve. Imperial edicts became monetary policies. But the plot is exactly the same. Growing debt, devalued currency, evaporating trust. And when trust dies, everything dies with it. When money dies, everything else dies with it. Currency isn't just printed paper or minted metal. It's crystallized trust. It's the invisible glue that holds complex societies together. Rome learned this the most brutal way possible. They thought they could print wealth, manipulate values in their favor, fake prosperity while the foundation rotted, and they paid with 1,000 years of medieval darkness. The empire crumbled. The lights went out. Knowledge was forgotten. Civilization regressed centuries. But the lesson remained, written in stone and blood. No civilization in human history has survived the collapse of its own currency. It doesn't matter how powerful the armies were, how high the walls were, how dazzling the imperial palaces were. When trust in money disappears, the empire disappears with it. It's always been this way. It always will be. And today we're walking in the same direction, following the same footsteps that led Rome to ruin. Infinite currency printing, mathematically unpayable debts, inflation silently eroding purchasing power. The only difference is that now the collapse will be global, because the entire world depends on the same reserve currency. And when the dollar falls, not if it falls, but when, there will be no place on the planet to hide from the impact. The story of Rome isn't an ancient tale about togas and gladiators. It's a mirror reflecting our own face. It's a warning that has crossed 2,000 years to reach us. And we're ignoring it exactly as the Romans ignored it. In the next episode of this series, you'll discover how the Spanish Empire, the first truly global empire, made a different but equally fatal mistake. It thought stealing gold was the same as creating wealth. Spoiler, it wasn't. If you want to understand the patterns that have destroyed civilizations for millennia and how this affects your money, your future, and your children, subscribe to the channel now. Because this series isn't about the past. It's about what's happening to you right at this moment. And unlike the Romans, you still have time to prepare.